sure as the mayor is asking for additional funds for CPS, he's trying to project stability at the district, right? You could see a question saying, hey, why should CPS be getting more money when they're losing enrollment, right? So that would be my assumption as to why he talked about, hey, actually enrollment is stabilized, which is accurate in the sense that it is stabilized this year, but I think it's unclear if that's going to be the case moving forward in subsequent years.
The district has never been adequately funded to meet the students' needs here in Chicago, so we agree with the state increasing its K-12 funding to Chicago Public Schools.
You've seen our system stabilized, and I think there's no disagreement that the city of Chicago, through the good work of State Representative Leader Will Davis, that have shifted this funding formula to respond equitably. What the city of Chicago deserves as a result of that piece of legislation is something that I'm committed to pushing for.
CPS has a structural deficit of about $700 million going into next school year. They're covering about $300 million of that deficit with the final kind of tranche of COVID relief funding. ESSER is the acronym for it, but this is the final amount of ESSER funding that they have. They've gotten about $2.8 billion over the last 6 years through COVID relief funding. So they got about $400 million deficit, $391 million deficit going into next year. And so I think when Brandon Johnson is saying, when the mayor is saying that CPS is kind of owed this $1 billion, it's because the state essentially looks at the needs of CPS, and this is what they have with their evidence-based funding formula. They look at the needs of CPS, and they look at what CPS is actually receiving in revenue, both from the state, but also locally, so from taxpayers in Chicago as well. And they're seeing that the gap between what CPS needs to, based on the state's own formula, is about $1.1 billion. And when the state government approved the evidence-based funding formula, which is actually under Governor Rauner's administration, but with the legislature at that time, they made a commitment to fully fund all school districts by 2027. And so we are at a point right now where we're looking at probably like it's more like if the state keeps on funding, and they're putting in about $315 million of money of new dollars every single year. If they stay at that kind of minimum number, which is what's enshrined in the legislation, it's going to take until 2035, 2036 in terms of actually all school districts being fully funded. And so I think what the mayor and what CPS have been saying is, look, we're losing COVID relief dollars. We are a chronically underfunded school district, and there's not a lot of places where CPS can kind of eliminate its budget deficit, right? It's really a lot of their money is in people, and a lot of their money is in people who are based at schools. And so rather than have to go through school cuts, can we accelerate the pace of funding from the state to be able to ensure that we don't have to make tough decisions at the school level in terms of fiscal stability for CPS. I think, as it relates to, the state's budget itself, I mean, Governor Pritzker put out his budget. I know that he's got a couple different revenue increases to try to cover the $800 million deficit that the state has. He has committed to $350 million to pay for evidence-based funding, of which CPS receives about $30 million, kind of specifically from that total amount. But I think it remains to be seen, does the state in its $50+ billion budget have additional resource that it can provide to education, either that benefits all school districts or that might benefit CPS more specifically?
Keep in mind that the end of the access to federal ARPA funds make it impossible to sustain many programs without additional revenue. Now, who would have thought that that we were taking in all these federal funds and creating programs that are going to be going in perpetuity, that the state was going to have to finally pick up one of these days, which they said that they were being responsible in not doing that. I think we're clearly seeing that that's becoming a problem here. We said this was going to happen. Now here we are. The bottom line is, if the governor of the state of Illinois wants ideas on where he can basically stop setting money on fire in order to balance the budget, we're here with several ideas here.